So I decided to make this video series to highlight what I feel are some of the absolute best tools that both students and teachers can use to help support their mathematics and support their education when they're learning at home. And I'm going to start off with what I feel is probably the best free mathematical tool that's available, and that's Desmos. So I've gone to the Desmos website. I'll leave that link in the description. But this application is also available for tablets and for phones, so you can download it and use it without the need of an internet connection. This is what the page looks like as I shoot this video, but I'm sure it will change from time to time. Desmos has some different calculators, and they're good. There are a lot of good free calculators as well, and this is just another good scientific calculator with some different functionalities. You can have a basic 4-function calculator as well. You can see that there's some teacher activities and things along this lines, but the real strength of Desmos is the graphing utility. So I'm going to hit start graphing here, and that will bring me into Desmos's graphing utility. I have an account. I haven't signed in to it right now, but if you sign into your account, you'll be able to click here and give your graphing projects a name, and you'll be able to save them and come back to them later on. There's a lot of functionality, and I'm really just going to cover the most basic and useful of that functionality. And it's just that Desmos is the best tool for making graphs. If I just graph a basic line, for example, y equals 2x plus 1, you can see this line is graphed over here onto the right-hand side. Notice that you see these 2 points that are a little bit in gray. Well, those are the x and y intercepts, and if I click on them, they will stick on the screen like this. I can slide along this line, and while this is less useful, you can see a bunch of other different points that might be on this particular line. If I click here, I can graph any other graph that I might want as well. Let me graph the function y equals x squared, subtract 4x. This is a quadratic. You can see that this quadratic is graphed over here. I can change the colors by clicking on this gear and then clicking here. So I can choose different possible colors. And I can also choose whether I want to make this a dashed or a dotted line. So I'll just leave it at the blue that it was at. For this quadratic function, I can also click if I want to see what the intercepts are. In this case, the x and y intercept are the same. Oh, notice this point over here in gray? I can click and it will just instantly tell me what the intercept between these two graphs is. Let me draw another graph. Let's draw the graph of y equals -2. So I can see that that graph is going to intersect multiple things here. We have the y-intercept. It intersects our first graph, y equals 2x plus 1, at this point, -1.5 and -2. And it intersects our quadratic at these points as well. Now, Desmos will always round off to 3 decimal places whenever you're highlighting these points. The only time that can be an issue is when you're trying to teach limits, and sometimes it will round off to the limit when it gets very close. But otherwise, this is just an excellent and very quick way to highlight any sort of intercepts, x-intercepts, y-intercepts, where multiple graphs might intercept as well. Now, let me put a graph that is off of the screen. So let's do x squared plus 20. Okay, so I don't see it on this graph. If I knew where to find it, I could hit this graph settings over here. Notice that I can change my x-axis and my y-axis to whatever I might want it to be. Let's change the y-axis to -10 to 10. I can adjust the step function here. So if I put the step as 2, you'll notice that it puts my dividing lines every 2 units. If I change the step to 4, notice that my divisions are now every 4 units. So you can customize this. If you leave it blank, it will just automate it for you. Now, I still don't see my graph. Perhaps I could mess with these settings a little bit more until I can finally find it. But there's a zoom setting over here. And if I just start zooming out, you'll notice that I see my graph right here. And I can zoom in, I can just move around the screen and get an excellent picture of the graph. One final thing I will show you about this tool And let's say I wanted to use a graph that involved variables. So I want to graph the function y equals ax plus b. And I use this function a lot with my students. Notice that it gives me the option to add sliders. I can add a slider to a, b, or I can add a slider to everything. If I put everything here, oh, let me go back down to where my graph originated. Note that it tells me the a value and the b value, and I can slide this around. And this can adjust what these values and b values are for the function. So if you want to really show how the y-intercept of a linear function is dependent on its b value, you can adjust this to any particular point in time, and you can check the y-intercept just by clicking on it and see that it's matching up with our b value that we have over here. Perhaps I don't want this to go from -10 to 10. Well, I can adjust how far the b value is allowed to change if I want to. And if I make this go up by step 1, then what will happen is every time I slide it along this line, the b value will change by 1. Perhaps I want this to go by step 0.5. Well, every time I slide along this, now the b value is changing by 0.5. This is just the surface of what you're able to do in Desmos. It's an incredibly powerful graphing tool. And part of why it is so useful and powerful is it's just this simple. You type in the line and it shows it to you. You type in two graphs, you can click on the intersection points. You type in a general function, you can change these and kind of see how things change over time. So, excellent tool for students or teachers. I would highly recommend it to anybody who is doing graphing work at home and wanted an easy to use graphing calculator.